The scream shattered the morning silence like breaking glass. Karen Martinez stood frozen at the edge of her pristine infinity pool, her manicured finger trembling as she pointed at the tiny green intruder floating near the skimmer. What happened? Next would expose 20 years of buried secrets, destroy a marriage built on lies, and prove that sometimes the smallest creatures carry the deadliest truths. Because that frog wasn't just any frog, and Karen's reaction wasn't about fear at all. Part 1, the ripple effect. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Martinez estate as Karen stepped onto the travertine deck, her silk robe flowing behind her like liquid ivory. She carried her usual breakfast, Greek yogurt with organic berries and a steaming cup of Ethiopian coffee, toward her favorite poolside chair. The routine had been sacred for 15 years, ever since David's real estate empire had afforded them this sanctuary in Hidden Hills. She was 3 steps from her chair when she saw it. The scream erupted from her throat before conscious thought could intervene, a primal shriek that sent the yogurt container flying and coffee splashing across the pristine stone. The small green frog, no bigger than a silver dollar, floated motionless near the pool's edge, its tiny black eyes seeming to stare directly at her. David! Her voice cracked with hysteria. David, get out here now! The sliding glass door burst open, and her husband emerged in his usual morning attire, pressed khakis and a polo shirt that had probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. At 48, David Martinez still maintained the athletic build that had first caught her attention at USC, though 20 years of client dinners had softened his jawline. Jesus Christ, Karen, what's wrong? His eyes swept the deck, expecting to find blood or an intruder. Karen's arm extended toward the pool, her entire body trembling. There's a... She couldn't finish the sentence, her breath coming in short gasps. David followed her gaze to the innocent amphibian and his expression shifted from alarm to irritation. Are you kidding me? It's a frog, Karen. A tiny frog. Get it out. The words came out as a strangled whisper. Please, just get it out. Something in her tone made David pause. In 23 years of marriage, he'd seen Karen face down hostile board members, negotiate million-dollar charity events, and handle their daughter's teenage rebellions with military precision. But now she stood paralyzed by a creature that could fit in a teaspoon. Okay. David grabbed the pool skimmer from its hook. Just to calm down. I'll get it. As he knelt by the pool's edge, carefully maneuvering the net toward the frog, Karen stumbled backward until her spine pressed against the outdoor kitchen's granite counter. Her hands gripped the stone so tightly her knuckles went white. The frog, disturbed by the approaching net, suddenly came to life with a small splash. Karen's second scream was even more violent than the first. She bolted toward the house, her robe catching on a chair and nearly sending her sprawling. David abandoned the net and rushed after her. Karen, wait. He caught up to her in the kitchen, where she stood pressed against the refrigerator, her chest heaving. What the hell is going on? I can't. She pressed her palms against her temples, her perfectly styled blonde hair falling across her face. Just get rid of it, David. Please. Get rid of it and don't ask questions. David stuttered. His wife's face, noting the pallor beneath her expensive foundation, the way her pupils had dilated with genuine terror. This isn't about the frog, is it? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Karen's eyes darted to the window overlooking the pool, then back to David. I don't know what you mean. Bullshit. David's voice carried the same edge he used with lying clients. You face down rattlesnakes on our hikes. You picked up that black widow with a paper towel last summer. But a frog sends you into hysterics. Before Karen could respond, their daughter Emma's voice drifted down from upstairs. Mom? What was all the screaming about? Nothing, sweetheart. Karen called back, her voice artificially bright. Everything's fine. But nothing was fine, and David's investigative instincts, honed by years of due diligence on multimillion-dollar deals, were now fully engaged. He'd built his fortune by reading people, by recognizing when someone was hiding something valuable. And right now, his wife was broadcasting secrets like a neon sign. I'm going to ask you one more time, David. said quietly. "What's this really about?" Karen's composure finally cracked completely. Tears began streaming down her face, carrying mascara in dark rivulets across her cheeks. "You don't understand, David. You can't understand. Try me." The words came out as barely a whisper. It was 20 years ago. Before Emma. Before everything we built. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. What was 20 years ago? Karen's eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond his shoulder, as if she was seeing into the past. "I was supposed to be at the conference in Denver. The hotel that had this pool. And there was this man. Karen. He was a client. One of the big pharmaceutical accounts. I'd been drinking and he was so charming and..." She wrapped her arms around herself. We went back to his room. It overlooked the pool area. David's hands slowly clenched into fists. "Karen, what are you telling me? In the morning, when I tried to leave, he wouldn't let me go. He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd tell you everything. Tell you about the cocaine. Tell you about the money I'd been skimming from the charity fund." Her voice broke completely. "I was trapped, David. I was trapped and terrified, and then..." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Karen's ragged breathing. "Then what?" David's voice was deadly quiet. "There was a struggle. He fell. He hit his head on the coffee table and there was so much blood." Karen's hands were shaking violently now. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do. So I dragged him to the balcony. It was only the second floor, but the pool was right below and..." David stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "You killed someone. It was an accident. I swear to God, David, it was an accident. But when I looked down at the pool..." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There was a frog sitting on his chest. Just sitting there, looking up at me. Like it was watching. Like it knew." The revelation hit David like a physical blow. 20 years of marriage, and he'd been living with a stranger. Worse than a stranger, a killer. "The money," he said slowly. "The inheritance from your aunt that jump-started our business. That wasn't from your aunt, was it?" Karen's silence was answer enough. "Jesus Christ." David ran his hands through his hair. "The life insurance policy. You took out a policy on him before he died, didn't you? That's how you got the money." "I didn't plan it." Karen's voice cracked. "I was just trying to protect us. Protect our future. I couldn't let one mistake destroy everything we could have together." David looked at the woman he'd loved for more than half his life, the mother of his child, and saw a complete stranger. Every success they'd celebrated, every milestone they'd achieved, every charitable donation they'd made to ease their consciences, it had all been built on blood, money and lies. Outside, he could still see the small frog floating peacefully in their pool, as innocent and oblivious as David himself had been just minutes ago. "David, please," Karen whispered. "Say something. Anything." He turned toward the window, watching the morning light dance across the water where his wife's darkest secret was literally surfacing after 20 years of burial. "I'm going to the office," he said finally. "David, wait, I need to think. I need to He paused at the kitchen doorway, not turning around. "Don't touch that frog, Karen. Don't touch anything until I get back." As he walked away, Karen sank to the floor, her silk robe pulling around her like spilled cream. Through the window, the frog continued its lazy circuit of the pool's edge, carrying with it the weight of secrets that had just shattered a 20-year marriage. But Karen didn't know that David Martinez had his own secrets. And unlike her, he'd never felt guilty about the bodies he'd buried to build his empire. The frog, as if sensing the shift in power, finally climbed out of the pool and disappeared into the perfectly manicured landscaping, leaving only ripples to mark where. The truth had finally surfaced. David's hands trembled on the steering wheel as he pulled into the parking garage of his downtown office tower. 20 minutes of driving through LA traffic had done nothing to calm the storm raging in his head. The woman he'd shared a bed with for 2 decades was a killer. The foundation of their entire life, the money that had launched Martina's development, the house in Hidden Hills, Emma's private school education, all of it was blood money. But what twisted his stomach into knots wasn't just Karen's confession. It was how familiar it sounded. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt eternal. David's reflection in the polished steel doors showed a man aging years in minutes, his face pale, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his fingers through it. He'd built his reputation on being unshakable, the guy who could close any deal and navigate any crisis. Now he felt like he was drowning. His assistant, Monica, looked up from her desk as he approached his office. "Mr. Martinez. You're early." "The Henderson meeting isn't until." "Cancel everything," David said without stopping. "No interruptions. No calls. Nothing." He closed his office door and immediately went to the wall safe hidden behind his college diploma. The electronic lock beeped as he entered the code, Emma's birthday, and the heavy door swung open. Behind stock certificates and legal documents sat a manila envelope he hadn't touched in 15 years. With shaking fingers, he pulled out the newspaper clippings, photographs, and police reports he'd hoped never to see again. "Pharmaceutical executive found dead in hotel pool," read the headline from the Denver Post, dated March 15, 2005. Below it, a grainy photo of emergency responders pulling a body from the water at the Marriott downtown. The article was brief: accidental drowning, possible intoxication, investigation ongoing. David's throat went dry as he read the victim's name: Marcus Holloway, 34, Regional Director for Titan Pharmaceuticals. The same company Karen had been courting as a client. The same man she'd just confessed to killing. But that wasn't what made David's blood turn to ice. It was the second article, dated a week later: hotel death ruled suspicious. The story detailed how forensic evidence suggested Holloway had been moved after death, how blood found in a second-floor room didn't match the drowning theory. The investigation was ongoing, police were following several leads. And then, 3 months later, Denver hotel death investigation closed. Insufficient evidence to pursue charges. David set the articles aside and picked up the photographs. Crime scene shots he'd paid a fortune to obtain through private channels. Marcus Holloway floating face down in the hotel pool, his body positioned exactly as Karen had described. But there was something else in one of the wider shots: a small maintenance shed behind the pool area, its door hanging open. He'd made his first kill in that shed. The memory crashed over him like a physical blow. He'd followed Holloway to Denver, not because of some business deal, but because of the photographs. Explicit images of David with Senator Patricia Crenshaw's daughter, taken during what he'd thought was a private weekend at Holloway's cabin in Aspen. The pharmaceutical executive had been blackmailing him for months, bleeding David's company dry with increasingly outrageous demands. David had gone to Denver to end it permanently. He'd waited in the maintenance shed until Holloway returned from his evening swim. One quick conversation, one swing of a pool skimmer handle, and his blackmail problem was solved. He'd left Holloway's body in the shed, planning to dispose of it properly once the hotel quieted down for the night. But when he'd returned an hour later, the body was gone. At the time, he'd assumed housekeeping or security had discovered it. He'd fled Denver immediately, spending the next months in terror, waiting for the police to connect him to the murder. When the investigation was eventually dropped, he'd convinced himself that luck and his thorough cleanup had saved him. Now he realized the truth. Karen had found the body first. She dragged Holloway to the balcony and dumped him in the pool, making it look like an accidental drowning. His wife had unknowingly disposed of the evidence of David's first murder. The irony was staggering. They'd both been at the same hotel, stalking the same victim, for completely different reasons. Neither knowing the other was there. Neither knowing they'd both committed the same crime. David's hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold the photographs. 20 years of marriage, and they'd been living parallel lives as killers. Each thinking the other was innocent. His phone buzzed. A text from Karen: "Please come home. We need to talk. I love you." He stared at the message, remembering how she'd looked that morning, the genuine terror in her eyes, the way she'd collapsed at the confession. She really believed she'd killed Marcus Holloway. She had no idea her husband had beaten her to it. Another text, the frog is gone. I checked on Emma. She's getting ready for school. Everything's normal. Please, David. Come home. Normal. The word was laughable now. David's mind raced through the implications. If Karen believed she'd killed Holloway, she'd never investigate further. She'd never discover that David had been there first, that her confession was based on a lie. He could let her carry the guilt for a murder he'd committed and she'd never know the difference. Or he could tell her the truth and destroy what little trust remained between them. The office phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Monica's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Martinez. I know you said no interruptions, but there's a Detective Morrison here to see you. He says it's urgent. David's blood turned to ice. Detective Morrison. He's with the Denver Police Department. He says it's about a cold case from 2005. The room seemed to tilt around David. After 20 years, they were reopening the investigation. But why now? What had changed? Send him in, David said quietly. Detective Morrison was a tall, lean man in his 50s with grey hair and tired eyes. He carried a worn leather briefcase and moved with the careful precision of someone who'd seen too much violence. Mr. Martinez, thank you for seeing me. I'm Detective Morrison with Denver PD. I'm here about the death of Marcus Holloway. David forced his expression to remain neutral. I'm sorry, I don't recognize that name. March 2005, Marriott downtown Denver. Mr. Holloway was found dead in the hotel pool. We've recently reopened the case due to new evidence. Morrison set his briefcase on David's desk and opened it. Evidence that suggests Mr. Holloway was murdered and that the killer might have ties to Los Angeles. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Morrison pulled out a photograph, a hotel security camera still showing two figures in the lobby. The quality was poor, but David could clearly make out his own face from 20 years ago. Standing next to him, checking in at the same time, was Karen. We've been reviewing old surveillance footage as part of our digital evidence upgrade program. This image places both you and your wife at the hotel on the night of Mr. Holloway's death. Morrison's eyes never left David's face. Quite a coincidence. David's mind raced. They had evidence placing both him and Karen at the scene. But they clearly didn't know about the blackmail, or they'd already be reading him his rights. This was a fishing expedition. My wife travels frequently for work, David said carefully. If she was in Denver that week, it was probably for a client meeting. And you? I don't recall. David stood up, hoping to project confidence he didn't feel. Detective, this was 20 years ago. Without checking my records, I couldn't possibly tell you where I was on any specific date. Morrison nodded slowly. Of course. But here's the thing, Mr. Martinez. We also found evidence that someone had been in Mr. Holloway's hotel room after his death. Blood evidence that was cleaned up, but not completely. Someone with experience in covering their tracks. David's mouth went dry. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Morrison stood and closed his briefcase. We'll be in touch, Mr. Martinez. Please don't leave town without notifying us first. As the detective walked toward the door, he paused. Oh, and Mr. Martinez. We'll be speaking with your wife as well. Sometimes spouses remember details their partners forget. The door closed with a soft click, leaving David alone with the crushing weight of 20 years' worth of lies finally collapsing around him. He grabbed his phone and called Karen, his fingers fumbling with the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. David. Her voice was small, hopeful. The police are coming. Karen. Denver PD. They are reopening the Holloway case. Silence. Karen, are you there? When she finally spoke, her voice was completely different. Calm. Cold. Professional. Oh no. Detective Morrison just left. He had some very interesting questions about hotel security cameras and blood evidence. David felt the floor drop out from under him. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, David. Well, part of it. Her laugh was bitter. I told him that my husband had been acting very strangely for the past 20 years. Secretive. Paranoid. Like a man with something to hide. Karen, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago. I'm protecting myself and my daughter from a killer. The line went dead. David stared at his phone for 30 seconds before the reality hit him like a sledgehammer. Karen hadn't just confessed to him that morning, she'd been testing him. Measuring his reaction. Seeing how much he knew. And now she was setting him up to take the fall for a murder they'd both committed. He grabbed his keys and raced toward the elevator, his mind spinning through possibilities. Karen was smart, brilliant, even, but she was also panicking. People made mistakes when they panicked, and David had built his career on exploiting other people's mistakes. The drive to Hidden Hills felt like a death march. Every red light, every slow-moving truck, every delay meant more time for Karen to perfect her story, to plant evidence, to destroy anything that might implicate her instead of him. But when he pulled into their circular driveway, Karen's Porsche was gone. The house stood silent and imposing against the afternoon sky, its perfectly manicured facade hiding the rot that had been festering within its walls for 2 decades. David burst through the front door. Karen. Karen. Silence. He took the stairs 3 at a time, heading for their bedroom. The walk-in closet had been ransacked, designer clothes scattered across the floor, suitcases missing from the top shelf. Karen's jewelry box sat empty, its velvet compartments picked clean. Looking for Mom. David spun around. Emma stood in the doorway, still wearing her Westbrook Academy uniform, crisp white blouse, navy blazer, plaid skirt that hit just below her knees. At 17, she had inherited Karen's delicate features and David's calculating eyes, a combination that made her devastatingly beautiful and unnervingly perceptive. Emma, sweetheart, you're supposed to be at school. I came home sick. She stepped into the room, her movements predatory rather than daughterly. Funny thing, though. I wasn't actually sick until I saw Mom stuffing cash into a duffel bag and crying hysterically about frogs and blood and Denver hotels. David's stomach dropped. Emma, your mother was upset about something that happened a long time ago, 20 years ago, to be exact. Emma pulled her phone from her blazer pocket. She was on the phone with someone, I think it was her lawyer, talking about statute of limitations and self-defense claims. And then she mentioned your name. A lot. The teenager's calm demeanor was more terrifying than Karen's hysteria had been. Emma had always been mature for her age, but this was something else entirely. This was calculation. Where did she go? David asked. That depends. Emma sat on Karen's abandoned vanity chair, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. Are you going to tell me the truth, or are you going to keep treating me like a child? David studied his daughter's face, seeing traces of both himself and Karen in her features. But there was something else there, a coldness he didn't recognize. Emma, some things are complicated, Marcus Holloway. The name dropped from Emma's lips like a stone into still water. Titan Pharmaceuticals. March 15, 2005. The Marriott, downtown Denver. David felt the blood drain from his face. How do you? I've known about Mom's business trip to Denver for 3 years. Emma's smile was sharp as a blade. Did you know she kept a newspaper clipping about his death? Hidden in her jewelry box, right behind the false back where she keeps her emergency cash. 3 years. Emma had known for 3 years. I found it when I was looking for Mom's pearl earrings for homecoming. Emma continued, her voice conversational. Imagine my surprise when I realized the dates matched up perfectly with when you bought the property in Malibu. The one you told me was your first big score as a developer. David's legs felt weak. He sank onto the bed, staring at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Emma, you don't understand, I understand perfectly. She stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the pool. Mom killed someone, and you used the insurance money to build your empire. What I don't understand is why you're both so sloppy. About covering it up. We never meant for you to find out. Emma laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Dad, I've been managing your alibis for years. Every time some investor got too nosy, every time a building inspector started asking uncomfortable questions about your financing, every time someone threatened to audit the foundation's books, I made the problems go away. David stared at his daughter in horror. What are you talking about? Emma turned from the window, and for the first time, David saw something genuinely frightening in her eyes. Did you really think it was a coincidence that Thomas Brennan dropped his lawsuit against you right after his daughter got into Stanford? Or that city councilman Rodriguez suddenly stopped pushing for that investigation into your West Side project after his son got that internship at Goldman Sachs? Emma, those were legitimate favors that I arranged. Her voice was matter-of-fact. Favors that required me to do some very unpleasant things to very unpleasant men. But I did them anyway because I believed I was protecting my family. The room felt like it was spinning. David tried to process what his daughter was telling him. You're 17 years old, I was 14 when I started cleaning up your messes. Emma's composure finally cracked, revealing a flash of rage underneath. 14, Dad. Do you know what it's like to have grown men twice your age putting their hands on you because they think you're just some rich man's naive daughter? Do you know what it's like to smile and play dumb while they tell you exactly what they want to do to you, all while you're recording every word? David's hands were shaking. Jesus Christ, Emma, I never asked you to, you never asked because you never noticed. The words exploded from her with 20 years of suppressed fury. You and Mom were so busy building your perfect life on top of your perfect lie that you never saw what it was costing me. What it was turning me into. She pulled her phone out again, tapping the screen with practiced efficiency. But that ends today. What are you doing? Calling Detective Morrison. Emma's thumb hovered over the call button. I'm going to tell him everything. About Mom's confession, about your reaction, about the newspaper clipping, about the Malibu property purchase, about every dirty deal and covered-up crime that built this family's fortune. David lunged forward. Emma, no, stop. Her voice cut through the air like a whip. Don't make this worse than it already is. David froze, recognizing something in his daughter's tone that reminded him of himself during his most dangerous negotiations. What do you want? I want the truth. All of it. And then I want you to disappear. Emma, I can't just. Yes, you can. She gestured around the opulent bedroom. You've got offshore accounts, fake identities, and enough liquid assets to disappear forever. I've seen the files, Dad. I know about the Cayman accounts, the Swiss safety deposit boxes, the passport with the fake name. David's mind reeled. His daughter had been spying on him for years, learning his secrets, documenting his crimes. And now she was using that knowledge to destroy him. If you disappear voluntarily, Emma continued, I'll give you a 24-hour head start before I call the police. If you don't. She held up her phone again. Well, let's just say Detective Morrison will be very interested in what I have to tell him. What about your mother? Emma's smile was cold as winter. Mom made her choice when she decided to throw you under the bus. Now she gets to live with the consequences. David stared at his daughter, this beautiful, brilliant, dangerous stranger, who shared his DNA, and realized that the sins of the parents had created something far worse than either of them had ever been. You have 1 hour, Emma said, checking her watch. Use it wisely. As David stumbled toward the door, Emma called out one last time. Oh, and Dad. That frog Mom was so afraid of. It's back. David turned to look out the window. Sure enough. The small green amphibian sat at the edge of the pool, as motionless as a tiny sentinel. It's been coming back every day for 3 years, Emma said softly. Ever since I started reading Mom's diary and learning about Denver. Funny how these things work out, isn't it? David Martinez, the man who had built an empire on lies and murder, walked out of his daughter's room knowing that his greatest creation and his ultimate destroyer was the child he'd raised in his own image. David sat in his study for 47 minutes, staring at the go bag he kept hidden behind the false wall. Fake passport, untraceable credit cards, bearer bonds worth $2 million, and a .38 revolver he'd bought off the books 15 years ago. Everything he needed to disappear forever. But he couldn't bring himself to open it. Instead, he found himself thinking about Emma at age 7, climbing into his lap while he worked late in this same study. How she'd trace the numbers on his spreadsheets with a tiny finger, asking him to teach her about big people math. How proud he'd been when she'd started reading his business journals, absorbing complex financial concepts like other children absorbed fairy tales. He'd created a monster, and he'd done it with love. The garage door rumbled open downstairs. David checked his watch, 13 minutes left of Emma's deadline. But the sound of heels clicking across marble told him it wasn't his daughter returning. Karen appeared in the study doorway, no longer the hysterical woman from that morning. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, and she wore the black Armani suit she reserved for hostile board meetings. Behind her stood a man David didn't recognize, mid-40s, expensive suit, predatory smile. "Hello, David." Karen's voice was steady, professional. "This is James Kellerman. He's representing me." "Your divorce attorney?" David asked. Kellerman laughed. "Criminal defense, actually. Though I suspect we'll be handling the divorce pro bono once the state seizes all your assets." David studied the lawyer's face, recognizing the type, former prosecutor turned high-priced defense attorney, the kind who specialized in making wealthy criminals disappear behind legal technicalities and judicial corruption. "Where's Emma?" Karen asked, glancing around the study. "Upstairs. Packing for college, apparently." David's voice was bitter. "Did you know she's been covering up our crimes for years? Prostituting herself to protect the family reputation." Something flickered across Karen's face, surprise, horror, guilt. But it was gone so quickly David almost missed it. "Emma's a smart girl," Karen said carefully. "She'll be fine." "Will she?" David stood up, moving toward the window. "Because she just gave me an ultimatum. Disappear in the next 10 minutes, or she calls Detective Morrison and tells him everything." Kellerman and Karen exchanged glances. "What exactly does she know?" the lawyer asked. "Everything." David turned back to face them. "About Denver. About Marcus Holloway, about the money. But here's the interesting part, she doesn't know the whole truth." "What do you mean?" Karen's composure slipped slightly. David smiled for the first time all day. "She thinks you killed Holloway. She has no idea I was there first." The color drained from Karen's face. "David, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Marcus Holloway was blackmailing me. He had photographs of me with Senator Crenshaw's daughter. Compromising photographs that would have destroyed not just my business, but my marriage." David moved closer to Karen, watching her reaction. "I went to Denver to kill him. I beat his skull in with a pool skimmer handle in that maintenance shed behind the hotel pool." Karen stumbled backward, bumping into Kellerman. No. "No, that's impossible. I found him in my room, alive. He attacked me, you found his body." "In your room," David corrected. "Because I put it there." The silence in the study was deafening. Karen stared at her husband with dawning horror while Kellerman's professional mask slipped completely. "After I killed him," David continued, "I realized I couldn't dispose of the body without being seen. Too many security cameras, too many witnesses. So I moved him to your room, 2247, right next to mine. I figured hotel security would find him eventually, and the investigation would focus on you, not me." "You framed me," Karen whispered. "For 20 years, you let me think I was a killer, and you were framing me." "I didn't expect you to panic and throw him off the balcony," David admitted. "That was a creative problem-solving. Very impressive, actually." Karen's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. "The blood on the coffee table, his blood, from when he hit his head in my room. I planted that evidence to support the story. That he'd been killed in your room, not mine." David's voice was almost conversational now. "You did me a favor by making it look like an accidental drowning. Much cleaner than a murder investigation." Kellerman finally found his voice. "Mr. Martinez, I strongly advise you to stop talking immediately. Why? David laughed. What's the worst that could happen? I confessed to a 20-year-old murder. My wife already tried to frame me for it this morning when she talked to Detective Morrison. I didn't, Karen started. Of course you did. You told him I'd been acting suspicious for 20 years. That I had something to hide. You were positioning me as the killer while playing the innocent victim. David moved to his desk, opening the bottom drawer. But here's what you didn't know, Karen. I recorded every conversation we've had in this house for the past 15 years. He pulled out a small digital recorder, holding it up like a trophy. Including your confession this morning. Your detailed description of how you killed Marcus Holloway. Your admission to taking out a life insurance policy on him. Your explanation of how you used the payout to finance our business. Karen's legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair across from David's desk, her perfect composure finally shattered completely. The beautiful irony, David continued, is that you really did take out that insurance policy. And you really did collect the money. Which means you committed insurance fraud based on a murder you didn't actually commit. While I committed the murder and never collected a penny. David, please what? Please forgive you for trying to destroy me. Please pretend the last 20 years haven't been built on lies. David's voice turned vicious. You want to know the truth, Karen? I never felt guilty about killing Marcus Holloway. He was blackmailing scum who deserved to die. But watching you carry guilt for my crime. Watching you wake up screaming from nightmares about something I did. That was the sweetest revenge I could have asked for. Footsteps on the stairs interrupted the confrontation. Emma appeared in the doorway, no longer wearing her school uniform. Instead, she was dressed in dark jeans and a black sweater, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She looked like she was prepared for war. Time's up, she announced, holding up her phone. I tried calling Detective Morrison, but his voicemail said he's in transit to Los Angeles. Something about arresting suspects in the Holloway case. David felt his heart stop. Emma, what did you do? What I had to do. Her voice was steady, remorseless. I couldn't let you destroy each other anymore. And I couldn't let you destroy me. The sound of sirens in the distance grew steadily louder. I called the police 20 minutes ago, Emma continued. I told them everything. About Mom's confession, about Dad's reaction, about the evidence in this house. I also told them about the recording devices Dad's been using to spy on us for 15 years. David stared at the recorder in his hand, realizing it was now evidence of his own crimes rather than Karen's. But mostly, Emma said, I told them. About the body. What body? Karen whispered. Emma's smile was terrible to behold. Thomas Brennan. You remember him, don't you, Dad? The investor who was going to sue you for fraud 3 years ago. The one whose lawsuit mysteriously disappeared after his daughter got into Stanford. David's blood turned to ice. Emma, no. He's been in our wine cellar for 3 years, Emma told her mother conversationally. Right behind the 1947 Chateau d'Yquem that Dad's so proud of. I killed him when he tried to rape me during what was supposed to be a simple blackmail meeting. The sirens were getting closer. The thing is, Emma continued, I realized today that I'm tired of cleaning up other people's messes. So I decided to let the police clean up mine instead. She looked at both her parents with cold satisfaction. You taught me that family comes first. That loyalty is everything. That sometimes you have to do terrible things to protect the people you love. Her voice hardened. But you never taught me what to do when the people you love are monsters.